Hey, soldiers, California has recommended reparations. In fact, they've recommended reparations to the tune of $1.2 million for every black resident. That is actually what you could get up to under this proposal. Now, we're going to talk about, and I know there's agreement, there's disagreement, we're going to talk about why it won't happen. So before you start booking a flight, or before you start furiously checking Ancestry.com for that long lost Moorish relative somewhere in your lineage, hold off for a minute and wait at least until you finish watching this video. Go ahead, and you're going to want to go ahead and just hit that like button, that thumbs up button right now, because people need to know about this. There's a component of this that I really want to stress, okay? Because this particular component is something that America, I don't care what color you are, I don't care, what your ethnic background is or who you're sleeping with, there's something that we as Americans really need to grasp at this point in our history. And this reparations debate really brings that notion to the fore. So go ahead, subscribe. Go ahead and enlist, become a soldier of finance. Let me know you did so in the comments, and I will salute you. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. That is mightily important. Now, we're not going to talk about this from an emotional or a sensational standpoint. The fact of the matter is that there is a committee in California that has been tasked with looking at reparations. It's called the California Reparations Task Force. We're going to look at this clinically, and we're going to understand it from a deeper level, deeper than the mainstream media can get involved in, deeper than they may want to, because, again, we're taking the sensationalism out of it. Now, if we just look at it from, a 30,000-foot view, the California Reparations Task Force formally recommended that the state offer payments of up to $1.2 million to every qualifying black resident. The task force held a public meeting in Oakland, California on Saturday and voted on the final set of recommendations to be sent to the state's legislators. Now, this is important because some people are reading this. I monitor Facebook. Some people on both sides of the argument are reading this and they're getting apoplectic either way. Some people are saying, how dare they, and raising the argument of, how can you have taxpayers today be responsible for injustices committed yesterday, okay, or more appropriately, many decades ago, okay? So you have that. On the flip side, you have individuals like this particular gentleman that we're going to see in a second, who says that, hey, that ain't enough, all right? Now, let's just listen to what the guy has to say.
Trying to talk about now, yet you research back to slavery and you say nothing about slavery. Nothing. So the equivocal number from the 1860s for 40 acres today is $200 million for each and every African American. You're not supposed to be afraid. You're not supposed to be afraid. You're just supposed to tell the truth. You're not supposed to be the gatekeepers. You're supposed to...
Hush up, boy.
Okay, so how he arrives at $200 million, I'm not quite sure how he got to that particular figure, but that's the other side. I mean, it's not enough, okay? A couple of things before we continue. I want you to understand that, and I think people on the pro side of the argument need to understand this. Let's say the United States decided, let's go ahead and do reparations tomorrow. Give every black person in America $1 million. Let's just swing for the fences. Okay. Were you aware that 70% of lottery winners, okay, people who hit these big jackpots, 70% of those individuals go broke just a few years after they get the money. Now, this is according to the National Endowment for Financial Education. Now, if we're cutting checks as a country, where is the backstop to make sure that people who get these checks aren't broke a few years later? Okay. Hey, look, as far as the people who are against reparations, understand it could work out to be the greatest economic stimulus plan ever. And if the states do it, understand it will not be inflationary. The reason why is because states, they can't print money. Okay, that's got to come from their tax receipts. So that money's already out there in some form or fashion. So this wouldn't be inflationary, but could wind up benefiting businesses all around the country. Okay, now I don't know if you've ever seen the skit that Dave Chappelle did about reparations. Hilarious, as is 97% of what Dave Chappelle has to say. Hilarious, but with a strong element of truth. That's the best form of comedy, right? And in that skit, he pretty much made the argument that folk would not even have the money that long because it would be spent in a way that's consistent with conspicuous consumerism. And look, black people aren't the only ones that suffer from that in this country, okay? We got an epidemic of conspicuous consumerism across all ethnicities, okay? So that's a problem in and of itself. Now, here's the other thing. There are some folk that argue that, hey, if we give reparations, then there will not be a need for any set-aside programs. I mean, you got reparations. Now we're, at the 0 point and we can all move on, right? All right, so at the end of the day, when you count up the economic opportunity from a lot of minority business and set-aside program that the industries involved in that, when you add up that, it may end up being a hell of a lot more than what you'd see kicked out in terms of reparations. So if the governments, states and federal, said we're going to go ahead and end these set-aside programs in terms of, education, contracting, we're going to end that because you got your money, then, okay, no one's really talking about that piece of it. All right, so this reparations panel, that meeting got pretty raucous, all right, out there in Oakland, California. Reparations are not only morally justifiable, but they have the potential to address long-standing racial disparities and inequalities. Okay, if you say so, all right. This is according to Representative Barbara Lee. She's a Democrat out there in California. She said that after attending the meeting, the panel's recommendations breaks payments down by types of historical discrimination. So pretty much California is now going to get into the business and tell you how black you are. Okay, so here are the criteria. For instance, black residents affected by redlining by banks would receive $3,366 for each year they lived in California, from the early 1930s to the late 1970s, amounting to $148,099 that you could, get in total if you were out there for the whole time. Similarly, black residents could receive roughly $2,352 in compensation for over-policing and mass incarceration for each year they lived in California between 1970 and 2020. These payments could amount to $115,260. So, because some nebulous definition of over-policing, I'm not sure how they're quantifying that, but maybe they don't need to, okay? Over-policing and mass incarceration. Now, how do we quantify that? I would say that if you were looking for a definition of mass incarceration, it should be based on folk who were actually innocent of the crimes that they were accused of committing, right? Because could incarceration be wrong if, let's say, someone who murdered a family, for example, if they were incarcerated? All right. And when you say mass incarceration, are you only talking about black people, or are you talking about the totality of the population out there? In total, from these and other payments included in the plan, a black Californian who is 71 years old and has lived in California his entire life could receive up to $1.2 million. Okay, so you got to be a resident, okay, and have to have been a long-term resident to even qualify for the $1.2 million, okay? How they quantify how you were affected by mass incarceration or over-policing or redlining, I don't know, okay? That's not elaborated on here. But here's why it's not going to happen. Because this panel is just that. There's a panel. They don't have any legislative authority, okay? Now, they kicked it up to the legislature, and this is where it's going to stop cold at the legislature. Because the truth of the matter, another fact, is that California has a 6.7% black population, according to the U.S. Census. Whites and Hispanics outnumber blacks by leaps and bounds. Okay, so let's see. I think even Asians are competitive. Yeah, Asians actually are 16% of the population of California. So everybody outnumbers blacks. Okay, you're not going to have a state legislature, let alone a governor, put this measure into effect for 6.7% of the population. Okay, it's not happening. Especially when you consider that there's a big unanswered question. And I know the federal government probably is like, hey, let it happen, okay? Because they've never said they were waiving taxes on this. The federal government is probably going to allow the states, okay, do whatever you want to do. It's your budget, it's your money, but don't expect that there will not be taxation. So if you get the 1.2 million, you won't be a millionaire because the government will come in and take a sum that reduces that by, at least 30%. All right. They'll get their, pound of flesh. So look, that's what's happening out there. Reparations, California. I guess California feels as though if they can set a precedent for this, then they will especially set the tone for states that had a history of allowing slavery by law, right? You're going to see this whole issue disappear after, you might see it disappear sooner than 2024 because the Biden administration, they're not going to want to deal with it, okay? Because they are not going to try to alienate voters, okay? The Republicans are going to just come out flat out and say no. They're not even entertaining anything like that. Okay, and I've laid out reasons why this might actually end up being working to the economic detriment of people who would get reparations. Because if you get $1.2 million, the way Americans spend, you're sure to be in at least $1.5 million worth of debt before, a decade has passed, right? And the statistics we took a look at kind of bear that out. It's the same thing with folk that are in these pro sports leagues. Overwhelming majority of NFL players, NBA players are broke a few years after they leave the league, bankrupt, all right? It's because they don't have a financial education. That is so vital because a financial education could mean the difference between you being someone who works for $40 an hour, ends up being a millionaire, and someone who makes $250,000 per year being flat broke in retirement, okay? The difference, it happens all the time, okay? I see it all the time. Education is the key. So if people want to make money, they need to take that into their own hands, so to speak. They need to look at things from the standpoint of being able to say, look, I'm not going to rely on the government for anything. Reparations might happen one day, but if you're 71 years old right now, look at the other way that they design that. So you can only get the maximum amount that they propose if you are an older Californian, okay? Now, let me check something real quick because I want to check the average lifespan of black people in America, because that could also indicate that this thing is going to be very, very limited in terms of its scope. If you can, let's see, average life expectancy in the U.S. is 77. That's everybody, okay? Average lifespan of an African American is, hang with me, 72.2 years. All right? So if you're a black man, then you qualify for the 1.2 million, then you're only going to be around for a couple of months. And people might make the argument that, oh, you can bequeath it to your family. Americans don't really dig life insurance that much. 78 years old. And what I mean by that is, sure, you could do that. Okay, you could definitely do that. You could bequeath it to your heirs. But the statistics remain the same in terms of life expectancy right now and the way we spend money. So unless you put that in a trust and had some real parameters around how it was spent in order to make it true generational wealth, the likelihood of that money being there in perpetuity, and it could be there in perpetuity because it could grow over time, is slim and none. 78 years, 78 and a half years is the average lifespan of a black female in America today. Okay, so they set it up kind of like Social Security. Social Security is not meant to last you 40 years, right? All right, look, I want you to check out this particular video. In it, we talk about this debt ceiling crisis. And we put the lie to Janet Yellen talking about we've never been in a situation, we being the United States of America, have never been in a situation where we haven't paid our debts. We've defaulted before. Janet Yellen's lying. So check it out because we also talk about how you could prosper from this whole debate. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon.